You know, some of the biggest mysteries out there aren't in crime novels. They're actually hidden deep inside our own DNA. And scientists, well, they're basically detectives hunting for these tiny microscopic clues to solve some really big life and death puzzles. So today we're cracking a case, a type of cancer that seems to run in families, passing down through generations.
It's a question a lot of us have probably asked, right? I mean, you get your eye color from your parents, maybe your height, but what about your risk for a disease? Well, for some kinds of thyroid cancer, the answer is a big flashing yes. The proof is buried in our genes, and the hunt to find it is on.
And we're not talking about a small risk here. Not at all. Studies have shown that if you have a close relative, like a parent, a sibling, or one of your kids, with this cancer, your own risk shoots up by 4 to 10 times compared to everybody else. That is a huge statistic, and it was really the first major clue in this whole investigation.
So, what exactly are we tracking down? The official name is familial non-medullary thyroid carcinoma. Let's just call it FNMTC. It's a lot easier. The definition is right in the name. When at least 2 close family members get diagnosed, it's a huge red flag that it's probably not just random chance. It's likely something being passed down, something inherited. All right, so this is where our detective story really kicks off. The search for the genetic culprit behind FNMT. And let me tell you, in the early days, this was tough, really tough. Think about trying to find one specific person in a huge city, but the only clue you have is, they live somewhere on the east side. That's pretty much what geneticists were dealing with. Back then, they couldn't just point to the exact gene. Nope. Instead, they used a method that let them flag these really broad regions on our chromosomes, these loci. It's best to think of them as entire neighborhoods where the faulty gene was probably hiding out. It was a good first step for sure, but they were still a long way from knocking on any doors. And here are some of those first neighborhoods that the investigators flagged. For instance, they found a spot on chromosome 1 linked to one type of cancer, and then a totally different spot on chromosome 8 tied to another. This was definitely progress, but it also started to suggest that this case was, well, a lot more complicated than they first thought. They weren't just finding one hideout, they were finding several. Okay, so the investigation really needed a breakthrough. Our detectives needed better tools, something that could get them from that general neighborhood right to the suspect's front door. And lucky for them, a massive breakthrough was just around the corner, all thanks to some powerful new technologies. The difference here was like night and day. It was like going from having just a zip code to having a precise GPS coordinate. The old methods gave them the neighborhood, but these new methods, they could zoom into the exact street address, the specific gene, and even spot the tiny typo in the house number that was causing all the trouble. This was an absolute game changer. So what are these super tools? The 2 big ones are GWAS and WES. You can think of a GWAS, or Genome-Wide Association Study, as a huge citywide surveillance system that scans the DNA of thousands of people looking for common little blips linked to the crime. WES, or whole-exome sequencing, is more like targeted surveillance. It zeroes in on the most important parts of our DNA, the bits that actually make proteins, which is where the really incriminating evidence is usually found. So, armed with these incredible new tools, our genetic detectives finally zoomed in. They were so close. They thought they were about to unmask the one single culprit, that one master gene that was responsible for FNMTC. But what they found was not at all what they were expecting. The whole mystery was about to get a whole lot deeper. And here it is, the plot twist. It turns out there isn't one single mastermind behind this. The research showed that FNMTC has what's called strong genetic heterogeneity. In plain English, that means it's not one suspect. It's a whole network of different culprits, and it seems like each family has its own unique bad guy. Just look at this. This is basically the evidence board from the investigation. Every single one of these tags on these chromosomes points to a different gene that's been linked to FNMTC. They are all over the place. This isn't a simple case with one bad actor. This is more like a conspiracy with dozens of different players involved, scattered all across our genetic code. So, what this all boils down to is that we have to completely toss out the idea of a single thyroid cancer gene. It just doesn't exist. The genetic problem in your family might be a gene on chromosome 5, but in the family next door, it could be a completely different gene on chromosome 19. And that complexity right there is the single most important finding of this entire investigation.
But listen, finding out it's this complicated isn't a dead end. Far from it. In fact, knowing that so many different genetic clues can add up to create risk, well, that opens the door to a totally new, much more personalized way of thinking about how we can prevent and detect this. We're shifting from hunting one suspect to profiling the risk of the whole network.
And that brings us to the next amazing tool in the detective's kit, the Polygenic Risk Score, or PRS. Now, instead of looking for that one smoking gun gene, a PRS looks at hundreds, maybe even thousands of tiny little genetic variations all across your DNA. And it adds up all their small effects to calculate your overall personalized risk for a disease. So, does it actually work? Oh yeah. One study found that people with the highest polygenic risk scores had a nearly 4 times greater risk of developing thyroid cancer than people with the lowest scores. It just goes to show how powerful this is. By adding up all these tiny individual clues, we can build a much, much more accurate picture of someone's risk.
And that kind of leaves us with this one final, really powerful thought. The work these genetic detectives are doing is paving the way for a future where we might not just solve the mystery after a cancer happens, but maybe predict it. What if you could know your personal risk score? Imagine how that could empower you and your doctor to be more vigilant, to catch things earlier, or maybe, just maybe, to prevent the disease from ever showing up in the first place. That's the incredible future this research is building.